I want you to move from overwhelmed by information to confident in what really matters. I want to help you move from being unsure towards direction and purpose in your healthcare. I want to introduce you to health experts. I want to let you in on tough conversations on women's health. I want to give you a place where you can lean in and learn how to take care of yourself. Let's transform your health. Let's get clear on your goals. This is Women's Health Unplugged. I'm your host, Dr. Jordan Robertson, naturopathic doctor. We're back. So we took a break on the podcast, which I wasn't intending, actually. We made the decision relatively quickly to take the summer off. And part of it was inspired a little bit by Brene Brown for her taking the summer off her podcast. And I was like, well, I feel like that's giving me permission to consider taking the summer off of our podcast. But when we reflected back on the last couple of years, we actually had produced an episode of the podcast every single week for over 2 years. And it felt like the right thing to do to just take a pause, time to reflect. We didn't even run old episodes, which we considered doing. We just flat out took the summer off. And coming back to this sort of welcome episode, we're going to call it season 2, even though we've been podcasting, for like 100 weeks straight before we took this break. We're going to call this season 2, and season 1 was just a very long season. As we sort of embark on the beginning of this season, I started to think about what our goals and intentions are for the podcast, and it got me thinking about what might be a good kickoff episode for us, given that September can sort of often feel like this new year experience. I don't know if that's because I feel like I've been a student my entire life, and when I haven't been a student, then I've been either working in the university system or there's, I have kids, and so there is this back to something experience that happens in September. And so it always feels like this time where goal setting makes sense and starting to get really clear and granular on what you want to achieve seems to make sense. I think we are, have rose-colored glasses looking at our schedules in September going, well, if I can just get myself in a routine, ... then I'll achieve all this greatness. So it seemed like a good time for us to have this conversation about it's not really about goal setting, actually. We're going to talk a bit about purpose and outcome and why I think we need to get a little bit more clear on our purpose and get less connected to outcome. But we'll talk about that in a minute. Just as a quick update on the podcast, we've actually surpassed 230,000 downloads of the podcast over a couple of years of producing it. And we've really had some quite amazing guests over the last couple of years as well. And when I think about, my purpose for doing the podcast, one, it's quite amazing to be able to talk to, host, amplify the voice of other women who are in the industry of health and wellness, who are on this same path as I am for delivering evidence-based information to the general public. We wage this kind of difficult war on the other side of the health and wellness industry, which is the detox, waist trainer, juicing, my diet or the highway kind of approach to women's health. And it's, God, the marketing in that whole industry is quite good, right? It's made us all feel like we should be smaller and less than and taking shit out of our diet. And, maybe there's a supplement for that kind of feeling when for most women and most people, there is a different path towards health. I'm not even sure that is a path towards health. Let's be real. There is a more well-established science-based path towards wellness that doesn't get the airtime that I feel like it deserves. And that was really the purpose of me doing the podcast in the first place. I remember sitting in a hotel room when I decided to do the very first integrative medicine podcast. That was the title of the podcast at the time. And I was sitting in a hotel room and I ripped off a couple of episodes that were like these, it was like this like irritation that lived inside of me about myths that we had in the industry and in the health and wellness space that I felt like I just need to, it almost like felt like I just need to get it off my chest, right? Like, can we please stop saying this? Can you please stop believing that? And that's really how it started for me, was almost this like spiteful, counter to the health and wellness industry and which my profession is like deeply in bed with, really. That's how it started for me. It was more of this like irritated, kind of angry, spiteful look at health and wellness, and I was going to be the one to set the record straight. And even if nobody listened, God damn it, right? Like it was this very like angry kind of piece. And it eventually kind of evolved because I realized the conversations that I was having in my practice, yes, there were conversations about, well, does CoQ10 work, right? Should you take dairy out of your diet, right? Like there were those conversations, but there was more than that happening in those visits. And I realized that, the pursuit of health for most people has a lot to do with accurate assessment and being heard. It has a lot to do with helping patients be able to, I always say like draw lines in between their experiences or their symptoms to help them understand their bodies, so that, because that was really getting at the grassroots of it, right? Like if you don't understand your body, then the lab test to solve your hormone issues, right? Spit in this little test tube and will help you solve all your problems. That makes more sense when you don't know what's going on. Right? If you don't have this like internal knowing of what happens to your body with age and with time and with a bad night's sleep, and if we can't contextualize the way we feel against our physiology, then suddenly some of those other pieces, we can't tell right from wrong. We can't discern good information from bad. And so the podcast sort of evolved into this. We want women to deeply understand their bodies, be able to ask the right questions, get the right assessment. But we also needed to start talking about behavior change and mindset, because those really were the conversations that were happening in my office. So I could easily be like, no, that supplement doesn't work, right? Like that was the easy part of the conversation. The hard one was, why do you feel like you need to lose weight for your husband? What is it about this month that makes behavior change so difficult? How come putting yourself higher on the priority list of your family's health ecosystem is so difficult? Those were the actual conversations that were happening, right? Why are there only 20-year-olds in your Instagram feed, right? These were actually the conversations that were happening. Which supplement to take, is there science for this or no? That stuff's, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's easier than the rest of that conversation, which I've always shied away from because it felt a bit flaky, to be honest, that's what we actually need, that this is where health actually is. It was like, I didn't go to school for that many years to help someone figure out how to find quiet time for themselves. But it turns out I did, right? It turns out I needed all of that other knowledge to say, like, this supplement, yes, that medication, no. But then really where it comes down to making this big, like, substantial change for people is in these kind of conversations. And so the podcast has kind of evolved over time, where our top downloaded episodes are about what to eat for breakfast, how to set goals, right? Like those are our top downloaded episodes. Yes, you still like and want all of those, like, well, what lab tests do you need for X, Y, and Z? But really the conversations that you're latching on to are the ones that humanize your health experience and give you this connection to, I mean, I guess podcasting's a little bit of a one-sided conversation about behavior change and coaching and what have you. And so when I think about what our goals are over the course of this year, it's to continue to have these very impactful conversations about your body, your physiology, your, like, how to advocate for yourself in the context of your own health care, how to think about the challenges you have in your health, how to make simple behavior change so that you can start to pursue health. And those tougher conversations around like purpose and, you know, the way that our brain and reward systems and all of those pieces that work for us or against us in our pursuit of a healthier life. That's what we're going to focus on over the course of this next season. We've got great episodes on things like hair loss and bone health and perimenopause. And, you know, we've also got other ones lined up around, your relationship with work and some of those pieces that we know have a really profound impact on a person's overall health and well-being. Those are the kinds of things we're going to tackle this year. I'm also excited for some of our guest lineup for this year, which you're going to have to wait to find out who we have lined up. But as we have a bigger and bigger reach, we get to like speak to people all over the globe, which is really quite amazing. And part of my personal reward for doing all of this is to be able to connect with those amazing women and the people that I've worked with or connected with over the last 2 years on the podcast still are people that I would consider in my circle, that are all, sort of on this path of trying to bring better information to the average woman, and so that we can all sort of pursue better health. So I kind of struggled coming up with a welcome back episode topic. I've actually pre-recorded a ton of medical content for us. That stuff felt easy, right? I knew exactly some of the topics I wanted us to touch on, but this sort of welcome back, it was almost like taking a break made it harder to decide. It felt like this needed to be like super special, what we talked about today. But what I did want to sort of think about, and this is really honestly, this conversation for us came from me thinking about the podcast. I was like, well, what's the purpose of the podcast? Right. And every time I, sort of started that sentence in my head, like, well, what is the purpose of this? I actually framed it in the context of some kind of outcome. And it got me thinking about whether or not those two things actually should coexist together, or whether we often mistaken our purpose for what we want the end result to actually be. So, it's easy for me right now to say, I'd like the podcast to reach thousands of women. I have the knowledge to make that, I have the knowledge and experience to be able to say that that's a reasonable goal. Actually, thousands of you download every episode. So I can say that. But at the very beginning, when I started and I said, I want to reach thousands of women, you know what that was faced with? That was faced with 6 months of disappointment, actually probably longer. The last 2 years of the podcast have been quite successful, but the previous 2 years to that, which I was podcasting back then, I wasn't in a groove. I like haphazardly published episodes. They were angry, right? Like I said, they were like an angry tone. The branding wasn't clear who the podcast was for. Practitioners were probably our number one downloader and not the average woman that's who I really want to connect with is you. So at the beginning I said, I want to reach thousands of women, right? And that was my purpose, right? Almost like my mission statement was, I'm going to reach thousands of women. Except I didn't know anything about podcasting. I didn't have the experience to say whether or not that purpose actually was going to happen. And so instead, I really connected my worth in podcasting and my satisfaction with executing, I like lined it up with a goal, right? And that outcome didn't happen. And when it didn't, I started to question what I was doing, right? Well, maybe I shouldn't podcast. But like on reflection, I'd only published like 4 episodes in an 8-month window of time. Like I was not even really a podcaster. And it got me thinking, like as I started, as I sat down to think about where I wanted us to go and what my purpose is now with the podcast, is that it's coming from this place of experience and knowledge. But also the outcome for me that particular outcome has stopped being the most important thing, right? The podcast is now like about accessibility, where I can connect with people who are patients or who aren't patients between appointments, or where I can't support them, actually. It allows people where integrative medicine or paying for Medicare out of pocket is just not possible for them. It creates an accessibility point. It gives a voice to these topics where in private practice, I'm incredibly limited by the amount of time I can spend with people on these kinds of like deeper issues. It gives me this opportunity to connect with amazing women, right? And so none of that has to do with how many downloads we have. All of those things are just about, that's a deeper purpose. That's a more emotional purpose. And when I rebranded the podcast and set out to do this sort of goal, and I promise I'm going to circle this back to you. I'm not just talking about me and my podcast. This will connect to your health goals. I promise. I'll circle back. When I sat down to rebrand the podcast, and I was like, you know what? It's been crappy. Like the number of downloads sucks. I don't know who we're talking to. It's unclear who the audience is. I sat down and went, okay, you know what we're just going to do? I'm going to publish every single week. That's what some of the best podcasters out there do. That's what some of my favorite podcasters do. They literally publish every week. I don't listen to every episode that they do, but they do one. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do a thing. And then the purpose became a weekly conversation with Jordan and her microphone and her computer and sometimes a guest. And that became the purpose at the beginning, because I actually didn't have the skills or the knowledge or the experience to say how many downloads we were going to get. So the difference between purpose and outcome, right? Purpose is the reason for doing something, right? This objective that you want to hit. Whereas outcome is like the way it turned out. And when I started, I created a purpose that assumed that I understood what the outcome was going to look like, or it assumed that I understood how long it would take to reach that goal. It assumed I understood what steps I needed to take, right? Remember, I published like 4 episodes in 8 months. Like I just thought that just by randomly putting an audio track on the internet that I was going to hit my goal, right? So even though I went through some of the motions, having my purpose be some kind of number, like thousands of women will listen to this, having my purpose be some kind of number when I had no business making a goal that had anything to do with some kind of outcome, right? My purpose needed to be, I want to share, I want to connect, I want to talk about important things, right? That needed to be the purpose at the beginning. Whereas right now, like I have the experience to say, I'd like this episode to be downloaded 5,000 times, right? Like I have that experience to be able to say that. So how do we circle this back to you? And how is this a new year, new you, September, here we come kind of episode? Is that when we are goal setting in our health, we make the same mistake. And I try not to use weight loss as this like common example, but I do think it's an appropriate one because it's very common, right? The number one reason people book an appointment with me, or at least it's in their top 3, is to talk about metabolism and weight management. But any health goal that we make, right? Whether it's lower cholesterol, whether it's improve your bone health, and we have episodes on both of those coming up. Regardless of what the goal is, we actually kind of do the same thing. I want to lower my cholesterol by 1.5 points. I want to lose 10 pounds. right? We make the purpose of what we're doing, like the purpose, right? When you think about the word purpose, I feel like it should have a deeper meaning than a number. But when we say to people, like, why are you exercising? Why are you eating salad? Why are you going to bed early? Quite often, the purpose of why they're doing that is a number, or they say it is. And I want to argue that you don't have the experience. Sometimes we don't have the knowledge. And I would argue that we don't have as much control over what happens for us to make our purpose the outcome. I think we need to do something different, because think about my podcasting. My purpose was to reach thousands of women. And when that didn't happen, I kind of had two choices. Either I needed to change what I was doing, which we're lucky that that's what I chose, or I could stop, right? I didn't do it. It didn't happen. I guess I can't. This isn't for me. So when you make your purpose an outcome, the way it turned out, an outcome is the way it turned out. Your purpose is the reason you're doing it. But if the reason you're doing it is the assumption of the way it turned out, and we don't get there, it's going to take longer than I thought, or actually missing a lot of knowledge that would help me get from here to there, I need skills, I need a tool, I need support, right? When that happens, how do we act? How do we react? Because it's not usually to pivot. I think we can bring the word pivot back now. I feel like we let it hide for long enough after 2020. I'm going to bring back the word pivot. I think we more often struggle to make that pivot when we realize that we're not going to hit the outcome. And we more often than not go back to our regular ways. But remember, any goal that you make going into September, even the best laid plans still have to be incorporated into your life. And I had a really great conversation with my weightlifting coach this week, because I was really feeling like I was not going to hit my goals, which my purpose, my goals right now was an outcome. Like I had weights in mind of what I wanted to hit at the next competition that I go to. I am a brand new weightlifter, which I actually needed him to point out to me. He was like, Jordan, you're not a beginner at anything in your life. You are brand new at this. You have no business making a goal that's a number. And it's funny because we were already thinking about this kind of podcast episode. And I was like, you're right. I don't have any business making that goal. I have no idea what I'm doing. Why, how can I say, oh, I want a 62 kilo snatch at that next competition? I have no business making that goal. I don't have enough hours on the job or experience under my belt. But what he really framed was, you are not at the gym. You're away. You're working out alone. You are working. You have your kids off for the summer. You've got a lot of things that you're focusing on right now. So even though we have the best laid plans to move towards that goal for you, that still also has to happen in the context of your life. It'd be different if I was a professional athlete, which if I could make a career change, I would choose to be a professional athlete. I don't know which sport I would do, but I 100% would be a professional athlete. But I even those best laid plans still have to happen in the context of my life. So I really didn't have any business making my purpose the outcome, because I could see I was probably not going to hit that outcome and getting frustrated showing up day to day. So for you, as you start to goal set in September, I want you to separate those two things, purpose and outcome. What's the purpose of you exercising? How about getting stronger? How about building community? How about supporting your bone health? How about, working towards lower cholesterol? Those are all very purposeful goals that the showing up part actually ends up being what makes the difference, right? You get stronger by going. You lower your cholesterol by going. But do you have any business saying you'd like to get your LDL below 3.2? I don't think you have this experience or the knowledge to make that the goal. The goal can be to make it lower. we can't make the outcome, we can't make our purpose an outcome that we have no experience in predicting. And think of how often we do that, right? I want to lose 5 pounds and I want to do it in 4 weeks or whatever it is. No business. We have no business making that the goal because you're not in control of that outcome. What you're in control of is showing up every day. And our mindset is going to be the thing that gets in the way if we've made the outcome the purpose. Right? Are you following me? So back to the podcast. When I think about what our purpose is right now, it's about sharing. It's about accessibility. It's about helping you advocate. It's about hosting amazing speakers. It's about continuing to grow our audience, right? Notice how I didn't say I want 1 million downloads. I want to grow. We want to share. We want to expand. We want reviews. So maybe go leave a review. That would be really great. You would help me out. That's purpose, right? That's purpose. That allows us to show up in weeks where we can't really see the forest for the trees, right? I don't know how many people are listening. I don't know what all these steps I'm doing are really doing. It allows us to show up because what you made the purpose is moving towards greatness. You didn't say greatness is right here at this number when I reach this outcome. Because your mind will do the mental math on the gap all the time. It's actually a book, like there's a great business book, and I can't remember the author's name. Remembering authors' names is not a part of my brain that I have. I can't do it with journal articles either. And it's called The Gap and the Gain. And it's about how it's so common for us to look ahead and see the gap and where we are versus where we'd like to be. And very rarely do we look backwards and go, look how far I've come. Right? And so if you've made the goal a number, an outcome, a thing, and remember, we have no business making that goal. We do not have enough experience to say, I can get over there in 8 weeks if I keep doing this work. You don't know that, right? You don't have any business making that goal. But now, as we start to move towards that 8-week mark, our brain is constantly going to do the mental math on the gap. Shit, I said I was going to lose 12 pounds and I've only lost half a pound. And when we're constantly doing that, right, that would be mindset heroics to do it anyways, to say, well, I've only lost half a pound and I wanted to lose 12 by such and such date, but I guess I'll go to the gym anyways. Like the amount of mental gymnastics you would have to do to keep showing up when your brain is automatically doing this math that you're not going to make it, right? And so I think my argument here, I feel like I'm making a point. I think my argument here is that we often have no business choosing the outcome we're choosing. We don't have enough experience to choose the outcome. We can have a purpose. You can say, I'd like to go into this fall and build a healthy routine. I'd like to find a way to get more vegetables onto my plate. But don't say 10. Don't say I'm going to have 10 servings of vegetables, because the very first day that you don't, it starts to become a barrier to your continuing on with that goal. Say more. I like more vegetables on my plate. And then after about 3 months, you can say, I average about 4 servings a day. I'd love to get to 6. Suddenly, you have enough experience to make a goal that has a measured outcome. Start with more. When you gain enough experience, maybe then you can assign a number to it. But I'll say that even watching women who've attempted to change parts of their health for their entire life, most people are not experienced enough to be able to choose an outcome that is rock solid. But I think your purpose can be more than that. I think your purpose is more than a number anyways. If we actually ask people what their true why is for why they're doing something, it's never about a number. It's about longevity, strength, right? Those are the goals that we're actually after. So as we stare down this September and we have our welcome back episode here, what I want you to think about, and as we start to sort of move through this second season together, is thinking about what your purpose is. What is your purpose? And try to make sure that you're not connecting your purpose with outcome. Don't confuse the two. Don't say my reason for doing this is going to be the way it turns out. And if you choose a number or a goal, ask yourself whether or not you have the knowledge, the experience to be able to make that goal. Or do you need help? Or do you need the goal to be more of a feeling until you gain enough experience to say, okay, now I understand. I can add 1 pound to my bicep curl every couple of months. Maybe I can do a 25-pound curl by January. But don't do that on day one. I don't think we have enough experience to make a solid goal on day one. You just have to start. Because again, if you make a goal and you lack the experience to know what progress will look like, your brain will constantly do the math on how far you are from achieving your goal. And that, my friend, is what gets in the way of us showing up every day. Welcome back. Welcome to season 2. I'm excited for what we're going to accomplish together over the next 10 months, because we are definitely taking next summer off too. And leave a review. I'll see you next week. I hope you enjoyed that episode of Women's Health Unplugged. We're changing things in women's health. One episode, one topic, one conversation at a time. I want you to feel confident in your health. Please remember that the podcast does not constitute a medical relationship or medical advice. Please talk to your family doctor, your practitioner, your specialist, or anyone on your health team if you think some of the topics we discussed in today's episode apply to you. Take care of yourself. Until next time.